let's go for a first drive in a Maverick Lariat. This is my dad's new truck that he just bought that I'd never driven before. I'd never even driven any Maverick Lariat whatsoever. So I'm just cruising down the road trying to see if I could keep it in electric mode, and I ended up not being able to keep it in there. So you can see some of the controls here. This is a Lariat, so it's got all the buttons on the steering wheel, all the interesting things to press and play with. And you can see here on the RPM gauge cluster thing, it's not really RPM, it's like power being used. And so the more you floor it, the more it goes to the right, where the RPM needle would be revving up. Then as soon as you let off on the throttle, it starts regenerating some of that battery power. And if you get on the brakes, it really goes into that green zone to tell you that it's like recovering a lot of power. And so that alone was this interesting kind of dance that you're not used to seeing as you're driving. But for me, it was very entertaining. I like driving a hybrid just for the game of it, to see like, how good can I do? How many miles per gallon can I get? So then we continued on to see, what does this thing feel like? I mean, what's the power level feel like? What's the response? How quiet is it? And I literally had 5 minutes with the truck, but so far I was really, really impressed. Now I know that the Lariat gets a more insulated windshield, and so that definitely helps because then you don't have so much wind noise, but I really wasn't going that fast anyway. I was on a little surface street, 50 miles an hour maybe, so it wasn't anything crazy, but still I was really impressed at how well sealed the truck felt and how solid it felt. It felt like a very rigid body to me, and I don't know how to really quantify that besides feeling like, yeah, it feels more rigid than my truck. I drive a 2013 F-150 extended cab, and so the problem with that truck is it doesn't have a B-pillar behind you. So you have this big open space with the doors that come together, and there's nothing there to support them. So they just kind of wiggle and jiggle around, and it's like, it's not great. But in this truck, I think the fact that it's this unibody design, you have a B-pillar, it's newer technology by 10 years than my truck, and so it just feels like really solid and well put together. Plus, on the screen there, I didn't have a video of it, but you can see that there's the normal battery for the combustion engine back like behind the back seats, plus the hybrid battery is back there. And so the fascinating thing is that when you think about what that does for your weight distribution, it keeps it really low and in the middle of the truck, and that's only going to make handling better. So I didn't really get into the twisties too much here. We pretty much went straight down the road and straight back because the truck has like 85 miles on it or something. It wasn't really mine to break in, if you will. Whenever I do get mine that I've ordered, then it'll be really time to break it in. But I'm going to make more videos with this truck in the future because it's my dad's, so I'm just going to borrow it. I'm going to compare the bed size of the F-150 to my truck with all my contractor tools, put it in there, see how they fit, if they fit, see if the bed rails are high enough to keep everything concealed to where if you had like a bed topper, if it would close properly. That'll be really interesting. I am also going to do an acceleration test with it because I think that'd be really interesting. It's less than 200 horsepower, but it's also fairly lightweight. I mean, my truck is very, very heavy. It's like 5,700 pounds, something like that. It's almost 3 tons, where this thing's got to weigh half that. Fact check me in the comments and let me know what you think, but I think this thing's going to perform almost as well as my truck whenever it comes down to it as far as performance. And then obviously it's going to do way better in terms of miles per gallon. The leather wrap steering wheel feels like just the right size in your hands. And you know what? I was really impressed by the overall driving position and ergonomics because I'm 6'5". So I need a steering wheel to telescope in pretty tight to my chest, and I need the seat to be able to move back. So I need to have the leg room in this direction, but I need to be able to still reach the steering wheel in this direction. And so certain vehicles, like I drove a 2015 Subaru BRZ, that steering wheel doesn't telescope. And so if I move the seat back far enough to where I can use the pedals properly, then the steering wheel's too far away. And so I've got to really have both of those adjustments to fit in this thing properly. And you might be saying, hey man, it's a tiny little truck. Like, what are you trying to do fitting in this tiny little truck anyway? You should keep the F-150. You should get something big. You should buy a Raptor. I understand that sentiment. I don't want to drive those vehicles. I want to drive something that's cheap and small and nimble and easy to get around in and cheap. So this was really a big test for me to see if I could fit, and we passed with flying colors. The weird thing was too that I didn't even adjust the seat back from where my dad had it, and he's like 5'10", 5'11". So I think that they've just really engineered a lot of like knee and leg room under there, and it just felt pretty darn natural. I mean, I might move it back a little bit if it was my truck and I wanted to really like set it the way I want for a road trip. But even as it is right now in my extended cab F-150, if I have anyone behind me, I've got to scoot my seat way forward. So that's not great. But here, I'm going to put this thing in sport mode and see how it feels.
Oh.
anger.
Turns red, huh?
Mm-hmm. What I noticed was I kept my foot at a constant throttle position, and I went from eco to sport mode. And even though my foot didn't move, the truck really behaved differently with the same amount of throttle input. And so what that's telling me is that part of what sport mode does is make the throttle a lot more sensitive and sort of bump up and bring forward the amount of throttle it's applying based on how much pedal you're pushing. And so it's not like it's generating more power magically, I don't think, unless they're deploying energy differently in the hybrid system. I think it's mostly throttle position to make you feel like, oh wow, we're really going now, even though I only pushed it like halfway. But it was noticeably angrier. So it's really not what this truck is about. And I don't know if Ford still has any plans to build a performance version of this truck, because that would be very interesting and depressing. If I ordered a hybrid and then they came out with a sporty one, I would probably be upset. But that would be fairly interesting. Like a tiny compact sport truck would be a very interesting new thing for this market that is really not even offered right now. That would make more sense to have a sport mode in that truck. In this truck, you know, it's made for cruising, it's made to get mileage. Sport really isn't part of that vocabulary, but hey, it's got the mode. And granted, I was trying to get as good a mileage as I could get, but I floored it a few times. I was driving normally to keep up with traffic. Like, I was mostly playing the game just from a stoplight to see what kind of mileage I could get. To go, okay, how much throttle can I give it and stay in electric mode? And interestingly enough, I feel like I did good at that game, because on flat ground, I got up to above 45 miles per hour in purely EV mode. So as long as you're careful enough with the pedal, and I think that was about a 10% power application, if you will, then I was able to keep it in EV mode. And so that was really interesting to me, because I'm going, hey, if you had a little bit of a downhill, or if you had some other condition that it wasn't really taxing and drawing too much load on the truck to where the combustion engine had to kick on, you could maybe even get up to like freeway speeds in EV mode. That's going to be a new game for another video. But if you can kind of squint and see in this clip, you can see up here in the top right corner that I average 40 miles per gallon on my little quick 5 or 10 minute runabout down the street and back, which I just think is incredible. I mean, I've never owned a vehicle that got that good of mileage ever, period, let alone a truck. So I'm pretty impressed with this thing. If you want to see more Maverick videos in the near term, or more car review and interesting kind of fun driving videos in the long term, then please subscribe, because it's totally for free. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about that performance Maverick that Ford may or may not be building, watch this video next.